Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Ariella Morkowitz, the founder of SVIVAH, which is about creating a more nourishing communal faith experience for Jewish women, where we define both Jewish and women very broadly. If you want to be with us, we want you to be with us and welcome. We love that we are multi-generational and diverse and we come together in celebration and support of what it means to be a Jewish woman, our unique lens on the world and how we walk through the world. HerTorah is a SVIVAH program under the direction of the fantastic Rabbanit Aliza Sperling. It's a space dedicated to bringing our diverse audience of women together over our shared foundational texts. Women who might not otherwise cross paths with one another, but use our lived experience, the wisdom that we've gleaned from the lives that we've led and where we've been and who we are as individuals to come together over our Torah and our Jewish texts. And that experience both elevates our opportunity to learn these texts together and learn with and from one another. It's an amazing opportunity to learn with each other and also to discover new educators and scholars who come and bring us together and uplift all of us when they gather us around the HerTorah table. I want to take a second to thank those who make HerTorah possible. Obviously, Rabbanit Aliza Sperling, thank you so much for all of your thoughtfulness and creativity in building these beautiful rooms where we can come together in community and learning. Next, Yeshivat Maharat, thank you for your partnership in raising the bar for excellence in Torah scholarship and elevating women's voices. And to the Aviv and Covenant Foundations for your faith in HerTorah to create a unique way of learning together in community. This HerTorah is a departure from how we usually do. Once upon a time in yesteryear, we actually came together around real tables with real people in person. And then we moved to Zoom, which has been both an actual delightful blessing to actually be able to discover a wonderful, broader, new audience that reaches far and wide and really actually sustains that intimacy that is part of Rabbanit Aliza's vision of really coming close to one another through this learning process. This Elul happens to coincide with the craziness that is August. I don't know about you, but my day is full of either back to school or last minute vacationing, and everybody is all over the place. And the idea of thinking about Rosh Hashanah is nowhere near where it probably should be because it is upon us in a hot second. So we've actually been taking time this month to come together with some of the most fantastic thinkers, leaders, scholars, just thoughtful women who have taken time to reflect on this month, to think about what we're walking into in these high holidays, and so graciously are sharing their thoughtfulness and wisdom with us. I'm going to make a very strong recommendation that you go to our website, svivah.org, and sign up for our mailing list so that you don't miss a single one of these incredible women who are offering such different views that, you know, as I, in the lucky position of getting to do half of these interviews, have been able to sit and just glean and take in so much of what they're sharing that is so nourishing and so rich. You don't want to miss a single one. So go to our website, svivah.org, and sign up for our mailing list. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And today, I have the honor of being with Rabbi Jen Gubitz, and I get to introduce you and sing your praises for a little bit, because one of the pieces of this project that we love is taking a minute to amplify and lift up the incredible leaders who have held us all year long, and take a moment to say thank you for that incredible, hard work, and just say with such appreciation, thank you for what you do and how you do it. And I'm really excited to be lifting you up while you're sharing all the teaching that lifts us up. So for a second, I actually really love so much of your bio. So I want to actually go unpack it a little bit, if you don't mind. I'm just going to take a second.
Awesome.
So I just listened to the last episode of your OMFG podcast and had a moment of just, I want to go back to camp. So the warmth that you have coming through your podcast is so great. It's funny, it's awesome, it's real. I totally love it. I will confess to being such a fan of your writing. Everybody should take a minute and just go Google Jen Gubitz and read whatever you find and come across, especially the stuff that you've been writing throughout this pandemic has been just so spot on and really just speaking the words and articulating so much of what we've been feeling. So I'm so grateful for the writing that you've shared. You're a rabbi educator at Temple Shalom in Newton, Massachusetts, and the founder of Modern Jew-ish. Did I do it okay?
Got it.
Supporting couples through marriage and beyond. And I love that you also happen to be a chaplain and that I want to ask a million questions. We're not going to do it now about writing about Jewish death education for children.
I'm not a chaplain, but I do have a little bit of chaplaincy experience. I'm not fully certified. And yes, I wrote my rabbinic thesis on death ed for kids because I wanted us to approach death education the way we do sex education, which could use some work too, which is that if we talk about it in advance, we won't be shocked by it when something does happen, when we do have a loss. And especially for kids, it's such a confounding moment. And also often it's their parents that are the immediate mourners and grieving, that it's very hard for them to explain to kids what's going on in that moment. And so why not do a little bit of advanced sort of like previewing of like more delicately than like everybody dies, kid, but like thinking about what it means to live a full life and also what it means when people face the end of their life and how we as mourners can live our best lives so that when it does happen, we're a bit more prepared.
I love that. And I love that it's done in a Jewish context and with a lens to answering the hundreds of questions that come up. That's amazing. And I will, if you don't mind, follow up with you on that. But in the meantime, while you're here, I'm gonna ask you, if you don't mind, you've been so thoughtful this entire year through. I really just, getting a glimpse into how you're thinking and approaching and feeling your way through this year through some of your writing. If you don't mind, I'd love you to share with all of us what teshuvah is looking like for you. I won't define it, I'll let you do that. Yeah. But what it's looking like for you this year.
So when you posed this question, you said from whatever perspective that you hold, whether it's your work and so on. And so from the practice of being me, I'll say teshuvah, change, reflection is hard. I would rather sit on the couch and eat potato chips, gluten-free Oreos, and peanut M&Ms, which I have recently partaken of, than pursue change and transformation, because staying safely ensconced in a couch is much safer. And if you don't have a nut allergy, peanut M&Ms are much safer, right? Than like going through your life and being like, what were my mistakes this year? How can I pursue being a better version of me? And also we live in a society that is so focused on chiseling a version of ourselves that the world sees, that there has to be a balance somewhere in between sitting on the couch, eating M&Ms and chiseling that perfect image of yourself. And so when I was thinking about this question, I was thinking actually about my practice of Musar. I also work for the Musar Institute. And so I was working on a teaching about teshuvah that's rather fresh in my mind. First of all, Musar is Jewish wisdom that dates back. It's actually rooted in the original text of You Shall Be Holy. It's picked up again in the 11th century by Bachi ibn Pakuda, and then again was repopularized in 18th, 19th, 20th century by a number of sages in Eastern Europe. And then again, brought forward to the masses by many wonderful scholars. The one I'm working with is Alan Marinis. And it's about how to be your best self through a Jewish framework. And it uses different values or midot, soul traits that we all have. Some of us have different cocktails of what we need to work on than others. So patience, humility, how much space we take up, gratitude, bitachon, trust. And those can change on the day, whether you're driving, like you're in DC traffic. So like that's a place to practice all of your soul traits. I'm in Boston. And what the Musar masters say is that change is hard, and they suggest that we shouldn't try to make it overnight. And sometimes Rabbi Leuchter talks about this moment where like Elul happens and everyone's like, OMG, or in the case of my podcast, OMFG, I need to change immediately because Rosh Hashanah is coming and I got to be ready. And I actually think like, I didn't know what Elul was until I was in rabbinical school. So at least having a month lead up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is like a good runway. A lot of people, myself included growing up, just like showed up to temple on Rosh Hashanah and it was like, I hope it works without any prep. We bought Rose Hashanah dresses when I was a kid. So we did prep. And my parents are educators. So we had our Rose Hashanah dresses to go to Rosh Hashanah. But
That's amazing.
I didn't know about like the spiritual prep. And so this Rabbi Leuchter, who's in Jerusalem, he said, you can't just make change overnight. Also because then you're going to revert back really quickly. And so he talks about incremental change. And so an example of incremental change, which is true too for a Musar Midah, is that you do something step by step. You make tiny adjustments, right? So if you're really struggling with patience, the goal isn't to suddenly just be patient. It doesn't work like that, but to practice patience when you're sitting in traffic and want to lay on your horn on someone thinking like, wow, maybe they're on their way to the hospital. Or, wow, it's okay if I wait because everyone is important, not just me. And these little tweaks help us make longer or larger changes more impactfully, because if you work on them small step by step, as you unravel a little bit when you get to January, you know, like halfway through the year, you might not go all the way back to the beginning. You might just take a few steps back, which reminded me, right? So like we want to take a few steps forward in our teshuvah, some incremental steps forward. And so if you take a few steps back, few steps forward, I realize that's like the Amidah. That's like we take steps backward and forward in order to approach God in the Amidah. So why not take steps forward and backward and forward again when we face ourselves in teshuvah?
Wow.
And so my ultimate drash on this reflection interpretation is that the moon can be our guide, because the moon is incremental.
Ooh.
Constantly going, you know, the cycles of the moon waxing and waning, and you look up at the sky and you're like, oh gosh, it's 2 weeks to Rosh Hashanah. And then 2 weeks after Rosh Hashanah, you look up at the sky and it's a new full moon. And you know that Sukkot and Simchat Torah are on their way. But it constantly is ebbing and flowing and constantly growing and changing and shifting. So I imagine that our teshuvah is like the moon, enduring, but not necessarily like the full moon doesn't just happen like that.
That's awesome. And I think that it's a really tangible, in your face, better than a sticky note, you know, on your bathroom mirror. Just a reminder of what we all have goals for progress, or we should set goals for ourselves. I think so much of this, you know, whatever New Year's resolution we set for ourselves, whatever change we're looking forward to. But the idea of actually having a goal of mimicking something that we visibly see that is constantly changing, but reminding us what change means, so that we're not so hard on ourselves in giving up when we, you know, inevitably take those steps back.
Yeah.
I really like that a lot.
It also prevents sort of like the crash dieting of January 1.
Yeah.
Right? Like Judaism offers us so much more than just the clock striking a new year. And so I think it's an incremental change is an expansive approach to becoming our finest selves. And also, who is our finest self? That's going to shift and change and grow like the moon throughout our lives.
I appreciate that one, because the idea of actually being like, not having this Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur experience be a reflection on backward of all the things that I wasn't this past year and all the ways that I didn't and all the things that I didn't accomplish and like, I still have more to do. But instead to have it be an intention setting of, okay, you have a year. How are you going to, what are you going to practice moving yourself along and having this cyclical piece of it with the incremental pieces of just understand that progress is in these bits. I love that. I really do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So happy new year, right? It's a whole year.
Yes. Yes. It's not a day.
Yeah.
You're right. It's the start of a year of progress, hopefully, rather than this immediate change, because that has not worked in all of my years thus far.
Nope.
That has not been a strategy for success.
Yeah.
Do I get to ask you one more question?
Yeah.
Can you share with us some Torah that has been holding you this year? I think you've been a holder of a lot of folk this year, and I'd be curious if what you might share. Thank
you. Yeah, and I shared this, it's a touchstone text when you've shared it in multiple places. So it's also on the OMFG podcast. I've always been drawn to Midrash, filling in the blanks, trying to understand what's going on in Torah through the eyes of the rabbis and modern people like us. And I'm always drawn to Genesis. And I'm especially drawn to that moment when Adam and Eve are in the garden and they see darkness for the first time. Their lives before they encountered knowledge were sort of like idyllic Garden of Eden, bright, sunshiny. I imagine they were eating like strawberries and drinking pina coladas just to like embellish it a little bit. But then they experience the fruits of knowledge and they're terrified because they've never encountered darkness before. And so the rabbis of the Midrash, who themselves are exiled from where they have known life, had to get creative within their new context. And they're curious about this moment too. And I imagine that they're asking sort of like, what do we do when we can't see the future? We don't know what's going to happen, right? What does darkness mean? And I think what they come up with is a metaphor of comfort for us now. And this is what the text says and a little bit of my own gloss on it, but I imagine them thinking of Adam and Eve crying in the darkness. And they are thinking, what do we do? How do we help comfort Adam and Eve? And so the rabbis actually write the flame of Havdalah, the ceremony to separate Shabbat from the rest of the week, into Adam's hand.
Wow.
So, yeah, I know, it's amazing. And so then Adam immediately cries out a blessing. Thank you, O source of light, for the sacred light. And then he, although I'd like to imagine it was Eve, says, blessed are you, O God, who divides light from darkness. So they could have put anything in his hands, right? So the very basic possibility is that they needed a reason they needed to be like, Havdalah has happened since the dawn of creation. Let's put it in Adam's hands. But I like to think that they were, in addition to being practical, thoughtful, and pastoral. So when they placed this ritual of transition and separation in his hands, specifically the flame and the blessing, to mark the end of the light of Shabbat, it's in order for him to face the dark of night with light. They literally are like, here's light. You can see now, to at least endure the unknown of a new week or whatever is to come. So they give him light because like it's like a torch to go into the week with. But then there's another text that I think even more speaks to this moment, which is that while that text puts a pillar of fire into his hands, another text puts 2 flint stones into his hands, which I think is where the Flintstone cartoon came from. But an aside. Obviously, their rabbis were very creative. But so he's holding these 2 stones. And I imagine that with Eve's help, they have to learn that when you rub them together, that's how you spark fire yourself. So they don't even give him light. They're basically like, here's something, make do with it. And so then they have some agency and purpose, but they actually take it a step further. And they say that if you don't have a candle or a match, or you're lacking whatever materials you need to spark light, then you can bless the bright glow of the stars. So you can just look up like the moon, the stars, and say the blessing over the stars. And if you can't see the stars because it's too dark or because there's smoke, in our world today, there's a lot of smoke and darkness, or for whatever reason, your view is eclipsed, then you can even bless the rocks on the ground, which is, what I imagine they're saying is like, make it work with whatever you have. Bless whatever you can reach. And I think that with so much out of our reach this year, so much that we can't see, we don't know what the future will hold, that we look around ourselves, if I look around myself, I'm sitting with my dog, I had some M&Ms and potato chips right before we met, I have a comfy couch, and like, that's all I have. And I have to say a blessing of gratitude. That's enough light. That might be all I get too, but that's enough. It has to be enough for me.
Wow. Why is that so hard for us?
It's so easy to know what you don't have, to compare, the comparing mind, the judging mind, the jealousy. The Musar masters would say like envy and lust and anger are what distract us from who we want to be. And I think envy is serious. And I often will tell people, I covet your shoes sort of as a joke, but I have shoes, so I'm okay. But a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't. And envy really can distract us from noticing sort of the rocks on the ground and how beautiful even they are.
Wow. Thank you. I'm going to sit with that one. I think what you're offering is a really lovely compliment to, I had the honor of actually interviewing Eliza Sperling to start this series off. And she shared how she looks at Rosh Hashanah as just this stopping point and an opportunity to just go think for a second, if all the work that you've put in, if all the wherever you are right now and the work that you put in to get to where you are right now is actually where you want to be, and how distracted we often get, so that we kind of lose our way. And this compliment fits so nicely with what you're saying about actually finding gratitude for where we are and what we have, and remembering that that's so key. And thank you.
Yeah, a delight, a joy, and good for me to say that to myself, because meanwhile I'm sitting here, you have a day and you're like, well, but I'm not like that other person, and like I need my own teaching for myself. So thank you for letting me say it out loud, because it's like a nice way of being like, you're fine, Jennifer. You're okay.
You're awesome. And you can go to our website and sign up for our mailing list, and then you'll get your stuff right in your inbox. It'll be perfect.
Can't wait.
Just when you need it. Rabbi Jen, I want to wish you a Shana Tova. May it be healthy, may it be sweet to you, your family, your dog, and to all the people important to you and in your life. And to everybody listening, I hope that you will take a second and go sign up on our website and find us, because not only this wisdom, but the wisdom of all these amazing women, it will make your month better. It'll definitely uplift these high holidays that will be upon us before we know it. So I'm going to wish everybody listening a Shana Tova too. And thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you so much. Happy New Year, everyone.